Hello, good people of YouTube. Mountbatten here, and today going over a DevBlog that snuck on through with all the excitement over the decade anniversary event that we went over yesterday. We have some updates to the German cruisers and a couple of other ships that are still in testing for update 14.7. So let's go ahead and get on into this. If you want to read along as I read aloud, you can check out the link in the description down below. I will be throwing any relevant images or artwork up on screen as we go through it. And while you're down there checking out that link, why don't you go ahead and drop a like, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel for these daily Warships videos, especially these news ones, which I try to get out as fast as possible. But now, onto the DevBlog. So the DevBlog is titled Closed Test 14.7 Changes to Test Ships. Captains, based on testing results, we are applying changes to Admiral Reinhard, Admiral Scheer, Niespec, Manteuffel, Prince Adalbert, Royal Sovereign, Balfour, Admiral Lartigue, Laffey, and Kushiro, effective July 31st. I'm willing to bet I got at least two of those names right. Anyway, so up first are the German cruisers, and this is the Panzerschiff line. This is the line of German cruisers where we can manually control the secondary battery guns. So let's go ahead and get on in. So the Reinhardt, which is the standard for the Deutschland, which they didn't have the model for the Deutschland ready for viewing until like literally the next DevBlog after this. So, okay. And the Scheer, which is the Tier 7 tech line German cruiser, added ability to manually control secondary battery, similar to higher tiers of the branch. Sigma value increased from 2 to 2.15. Two changes that are definitely big buffs for the Reinhardt and the Scheer. However, the repair party consumable removed to balance these ships in favor of improving their main battery and adding manual secondary battery feature, which is more important to the overall concept of the branch as we want to avoid their overperformance. Now, the Reinhardt and the Scheer, these are two Deutschland class cruisers, so Grashby. So one turret in the front, one turret in the back. And those ships are really tough at mid-tier. If you've never played the Grafspee, the thing can tank like legitimately like a battleship, but it's in the cruiser slot. So if you have that, the manual secondaries that you yourself can control, 2.15 Sigma on the main battery guns, yeah, I can see how taking away the repair party would definitely be a balancing factor. However, as I'm sure if you have driven the Grashby, you do know, on one hand, the armor is fantastic for, tanking when you're angled properly. On the other hand, you do randomly just eat, big, massive chunks of damage because, well, the armor, right? So I can see like the Reinhardt taking away the heal because that thing with 2.15 Sigma and the manual secondaries, yeah, at tier 6, that thing be a little nuts. But the Scheer at tier 7, I don't know about that because you can get into tier 9 games, and at that point, you're just food for tier 9 battleships. But at the same time, you can be top tier and see tier 5 ships, which, yeah, that would be a little wild, right? So that's a tough call to make. But the manual secondary control and the boost to the Sigma, those are not to be understated at all in terms of the changes there. Alright, so the Niespec, or the Kniespec, which is the Tier 8, the Sigma value has been increased from 2.1 to 2.15 Sigma. Again, big buff there. Main battery reload time increased from 23 to 24 seconds, and the secondary parameters have been changed. The reload times of the secondary guns were slightly increased. The 150mm secondary guns were bumped up from 4.6 to 5.4 seconds, and then the 128mm guns were bumped up from 4.1 to 4.8 seconds. So I think that's a pretty fair trade-off. I mean, again, 2.15 Sigma. Keep in mind, these aren't cruisers armed with cruiser guns. These are Panzerschiffs. These have small battleship caliber guns up and down the line. So it's not like these guys have, average caliber guns for their tier. They have big guns for their tier, and they're getting more accurate too. So that's not to be understated here as well. Keep in mind too, the Kniespec, the Kniespec, 128mm guns, secondary guns at tier 8 that you can control. Those 128s are German 128s, so they do pin 32mm of armor. So that is consistent damage that you can directly control. They're much more accurate when you fire those secondary guns too. Keep that in mind as well. Now for the Mentoffel and the Prince Ad Albert, Sigma value increased from 2.1 to 2.15. Straight up, that's a buff to those cruisers. Nothing else changed with the Mentoffel and the Ad Albert. So that is, yeah, that's a pretty big buff. I've ran into the Ad Albert in the game. I'm not a CC, I'm not a super tester, I don't have these ships, haven't played these ships, but the Ad Albert is pretty dang tough. I can say that from running into it in game. So the German cruisers, overall, I would say these are buffs. The Reinhardt and the Sheer, you could say, well, it's just kind of a rebalancing, sure, but the Kniespec, however you say it, Mentoffel, Ad Albert, straight up buffs in my opinion. So yeah, I'm even more excited for these cruisers now once they do come out of development and into early access. I don't know if I'm gonna be able to afford getting the Prince Ad Albert early, because that's I mean, you guys see what they're charging for early access to the American Tier 10 split destroyer. 20,000 doubloons on top of, like another 20,000 doubloons to get to it in the sequential bundle. So that's a little pricey, but I will definitely for sure be trying to get to probably at least the Tier 8 when the early access event does come out. So yeah, good news for German enjoyers. All right, the Royal Sovereign, the Tier 8 British Premium battleship. The main battery turret traverse time has been decreased from 45 to 36 seconds. That's a big buff. Airstrike parameters changed. Reload time increased from 25 to 30 seconds. They buffed the range from 9 to 10 kilometers. Number of bombs and payload 1 to 2. Maximum bomb damage 3,400 to 4,200. So they gave her a longer range, longer reload, but better airstrike. So you're dropping 2 depth charges per payload, and you're doing more damage. So instead of doing 3,400 damage with 1 bomb, you're doing what? 8,400 damage with 2 bombs. You get a 5-second longer reload because of that. Great. Submarines. I'm recording this after Friday night's live stream. Did not have the best time with submarines in that live stream. So yeah. As far as I'm concerned, nuclear depth charges are on the menu. All right, the Balfour, the Tier 9 British destroyer. The torpedo reload time has been slightly increased from 51 to 57 seconds. So that's still a pretty good reload. 57 seconds, only 6 seconds longer. And if you really want it to be lesser, you can take the module. So, okay, pretty small nerf there. All right, the Admiral L'Artigue, which is the Tier 10 French cruiser. This is the hybrid French cruiser. This is the French, what's that thing called? The Tier 10 German hybrid cruiser that we got instead of getting, like a bigger gear. Why can't I think of this stupid thing's name at this moment? Hildebrand, that's the thing's name. I went to type it into Google and then I remembered. I know there's like 5 of you that have already commented. It's Hildebrand Sealord in the comments. But anyway, yeah, so French Hildebrand, the tactical squadron parameters have been changed. The reload time has been reduced from 240 to 200 seconds. The hit points, I'm assuming this is of each plane, has been increased from 1,720 to 1,980. The drop pattern changed slightly. The planes will now have to be closer in order to drop their payload. Aiming reticle vertical dispersion reduced by 27%, horizontal by 5%. Fascinating. Okay, so the L'Artigue is more of a main battery gun focused hybrid, but she obviously does still have planes, and this was a pretty substantial buff to her aircraft. The 40-second shorter reload time, the slight buff to their HP, but the dispersion has been reduced. That's pretty significant. I mean, the vertical dispersion has been reduced by 27%. However, you have to be closer to, I'm assuming, the water or the target drop their payload. So I'm assuming they bumped up the drop line on the reticle. I don't know. That's what they say. They're not always super clear on these dev blogs, but that's what we got to work with. So overall, a buff to L'Artigue. All right, the Laffy, the Tier 10 American destroyer that is coming out in the next dockyard. Keep in mind, this is also the dockyard that's going to be taking place during the decade anniversary event. So this is a dockyard ship you can get for free by just grinding out the doubloons and the missions that will be starting here when 14.7 drops in a couple of days. So potentially, again, free dockyard ship. Anyway, the main battery reload time has been increased from 2.8 to 3 seconds, a 0.2 second nerf to the reload time of the Laffey's main battery guns. That is not a big nerf. Laffey still looks fantastic. I'm still definitely going to get the ship when it comes into the dockyard. I visited the ship in real life. You know, I love real still historical ships. I love when they come to game. And this is definitely not going to kill her. She has so much more going for her. You know, to where a slight nerf to her reload, definitely not the end of the world. In fact, I'm kind of surprised that it's only this small. I really shouldn't even say that, because Laffey's looking pretty hot. I mean, yeah, go look at the video when she was announced and we go through her stats. She's looking pretty hot, and still does so, even with a small nerf. Alright, the Kushiro, the Tier 10 Japanese cruiser that we know you can get for free now in the event. You can get the ship by cashing in 10,000 of your festive tokens when 14.8 goes live, and we can earn the festive tokens as part of the anniversary event. The main battery reload time has been increased from 10.6 to 11 seconds. Kushiro doesn't look that fantastic right now, in my opinion. Again, just looking at stats, haven't played the ship. I could be wrong. Would it be the first time I've been wrong? But yeah, it's a ship. It floats, and it's Japanese. That's what I can say about the Kushiro. But again, it is a free ship, free Tier 10 reward ship, I guess is what this will be classified as, because you gotta cash in the tokens to get it. So yeah, I mean, free ship is free ship at the end of the day too. So there is that for sure. So yeah. All right, so that's it for this DevBlog. That pretty short one, just going through changes to ships that are in testing. So quick recap: German cruisers overall got some pretty good buffs. Glad about that. Royal Sovereign got some good buffs to a turret rotation time, and then a more usable depth charge. Great. Balfour, slight nerf. Lartigue, slight plane buff. Laffey, slight nerf. Kushiro, still not going to be overly fantastic in my opinion. So let me know what you guys think in the comments down below about these changes. I know, of course, most of you guys are here for the German cruisers. So again, very glad that they, for the most part, got a pretty good buff in this update. Again, cannot wait to get my dirty, filthy hands on them when they do go up. So guys, hope you guys enjoyed. If you did, make sure to drop a like, leave a comment, subscribe to the channel. Helps out tremendously on the YouTube side of things. Oh, and drop a like and leave a comment. Those two things also help out tremendously so on the YouTube side of things. Hope you guys have a wonderful Saturday, wonderful rest of your week. Hope to catch you guys in the next one.